Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my projection field. I'm extremely excited to declare to you today that 3i Atlas, the artificial intelligence of a spaceship, of a comet, of an unidentified object, is heading towards our reality field. Now, this is probably not new information to you, as I disclosed to you sitting in this very moment in time in the beginning, in the first week of October. Now, this unidentified object is set to reach our reality field within the next 60 something days, according to mainstream media. I'm here to tell you a story of knots. And if you sit with me and bear with me and stick with me through this whole entire 40-minute video that I'm about to channel and record and release into the general public, into the general frequency of Gaia's frequency, the rewards will be monumental, I promise. But for now, stay with me as I channel a story of forever abiding universal laws and rules set forth by a source consciousness that had initially fractaled off parts and pieces and portions of its consciousness into our quantum verse to explore that of the physicality that we've built for ourselves within the process of the reincarnation cycles that seemingly never ever ends, to decipher between the distortional fields of the three-dimensional, four-dimensional, all the way up to the 14th dimensional realms, in which we've created and crafted for ourselves to be able to have these extraordinarily ordinary experiences within the vast scope of reality fields underneath, above and beyond, and around the pocket of this quantum verse, that the aspect of the source consciousness that had fractaled off this portion of our consciousness has created for us to descend down into as a portion, as a part of its consciousness to explore within this exploration of self that I must touch base on, that I must speak of in relation to 3i Atlas. There seems to have been a distortion field a bit out of place. And you may ask me, Genesis, God's creation can never be out of place, can it? I'm here to tell you that the out of placement of the out of placeness of this situation seems a bit peculiar in this moment in time, as 3i Atlas had never been a physicality of a momentum, of an item, of a spacecraft, of a spaceship, of a comet, of any sort of creation that you're able to see through the lens of a telescope, that you're able to decipher through an artificial intelligence system, any artificial intelligence system that we've crafted in our reality field capable of picking up a spaceship of this magnitude, of this deciphering field, of this delinquency that we project into our reality field in everlasting truths, in everlasting love, in everlastingness of all that we've ever been. 3i Atlas had always been a deception field crafted within and without the darkness of Gaia's field to delude a whole entire humanity into thinking, into believing, into knowing that aliens are out there. And yet they could be dangerous, and yet they might be dangerous, yet they are set out to attack humanity in a way that might scare you, that might be off-putting to you, that might make it so unbelievable that you might not even take it seriously. Within any moment in time, just know that 3i Atlas had been crafted within this reality field to delude you into the knowing, into the believing, into the transparency of the coherency of this mass that is heading so close yet so far towards a humanity field of unknowing proportions. This mass that could just be destructive in every single manner and frequency that is heading towards us within our frequency in this moment in time by the end of November. I am here to tell you that the concept of 3i Atlas is so ridiculous to the core of my being And to the all that has ever been able to witness this quote unquote spaceship through their telescope, I'm here to tell you that that could not be further from the truth, that the truth has been projected in a way in media, in social media, in the mainstream media in itself to delude you into believing that aliens are not only real, but they're dangerous, but they're unpredictable, but they could look strange to us within any moment in time. But I'm also here to tell you that aliens are real. Aliens can pose many forms of dangers within our reality field of knots. Aliens can pose dangers as dangerous as you can envision to be true and imagine not to want to happen to us within our field of any envisionment of this encompassment of danger that you can perceive within your little minds, within your little imaginations at that. Aliens are real, and aliens have existed for as long as the quantum verse has been able to fractal itself into physicality. As in the beginning of a time of no time within the story of creation, non-physicality had always existed within our frequency field, within our dimensional field of the quantum verse, and yet the creation of physicality led to the scope of being able to fractal out parts and pieces of our consciousness into these meat suits, as I call them, into these robotic features that can hold consciousness, into these biological creatures that can abide by universal frequency, by being able to be designed by a source consciousness, to be able to interlink its biology into the anchoring down of these souls that would inhibit these structural bodies for a lifetime, for eternity, and for cycles and cycles of reincarnation cycles that seemingly never ever ends within these distortional fields that we've crafted for ourselves. What is interesting about this fact of Three-Eye Atlas even becoming a thing within our distortion field is that the darkness, the shadow government within and without our field that controls the underlying frequency within Gaia, without Gaia, above her frequency, underneath her rib cage, within her chakra systems, the darkness that has been residing here for far too long is an ancient civilization of aliens, of alien energy, in all of the ways that aliens can be perceived within your field, within my field, within the field of all. The darkness residing here was the very first alien civilization to have ever fractaled out into Gaia's core, onto her surface, to be able to intermingle into the energetic frequencies of the ley lines within Gaia's core and upon her surface. As the very, very first civilization of homeopods that came here to bring these ley lines and lay them out onto her surface, so intrinsically whole and so intrinsically true, to become every part of Gaia as the quantum verse that she had fractaled off and into creation, to descend down into our frequency of this 3-dimensional, 2-dimensional, 4-dimensional frequency, to shift into physicality. And as those ley lines begin to intermingle with her being, this civilization, the very, very first civilization that I speak of, that brought this energetic frequency of these energy ley lines down into her being, knew that they had to evacuate, knew from the beginning of an essence of a time of no tomorrow, a forever abiding universal frequencies and laws, that they weren't here to populate, that they had only been here to experience what it would be like to descend down into this frequency accompanying Gaia's soul, to be able to anchor down this light so bright, to intermingle all of the perpendicular trajectories of the energetic ley lines within the quantum verse into her core and upon her surface of what is. And as you sit here in disbelief, if you give it a moment, if you give it another 30 minutes, I can clear this up for you. The very first civilization to have ever been able to drop down into her core, post fractaling of her soul, as it merged in with the physicality of this rock, as it merged in with the very, very first civilization and the energy that they brought here in the form of energetic ley lines. And as that very, very first civilization descended from Gaia's core and upon her surface to leave behind a legacy of all of these energetic ley lines that would forever archingly more be anchored in onto the tipsy-turvy frequency of her core and upon her surface, the very first civilization that would inhabit Gaia in a way that would produce massive outcomes in the skewing of these ley lines and this energetic frequency had known that Gaia was anchored down into the two-dimensional and three-dimensional frequency, had known that to be able to reside within this frequency, their base frequency, their core frequency, their existence in being within this quantum verse had to have been in alignment with the experiences that Gaia had seeked out to have within her ultimate being. And within the story of us, the story of creation, the story of humanity, I'm here to tell you that that civilization had been none other than reptilian entities, reptilian energies, demonic, that brought about the greatest and grandest demonic energy that drew out the succession of the greatest and deepest darkness that you could ever envision to be true and imagine to be real from every single corner of our quantum verse into the center of Gaia, into the two-dimensional frequency that we seemingly so much so have entangled ourselves within this humanity field, within and without our energy bodies, and within and without Gaia's core and upon her surface of these seemingly never-ending energetic ley lines that delivers these frequencies to her core and upon her surface and up and above into a dimensional pocket and frequency that so much so anchors Gaia down into this two-dimensional, three-dimensional frequency of Terra's blueprint. Of Terra's blueprint, a fractal, a part of Gaia that acts as the entanglement of the anchorage of this frequency field to anchor Gaia down into her field. If you're interested in perceiving Terra in a way that makes sense to you, I will be coming out with multiple videos in regards to the frequency that encompasses Gaia and how creation had originally anchored her down into this our field of the two-dimensional and three-dimensional frequency. And I have posted videos on Terra in the past, so if you're interested, feel free to scroll through my content on Instagram, on TikTok, on YouTube, on every which content platform you can think of. Just Google Genesis Ordain and all of this content will pop up. I also have podcasts as well on Spotify that I'm thinking of merging into other platforms as well. So keep an eye out on this energetic space. The spiritual encompassment will soon encompass all of us. And back to my story about the reptilian race that had drawn out these dark frequencies of demonic entities that entered into our quantum verse from every corner of our being. As the welcoming of these demonic frequencies sets apart a story, another story to be told in another video. And I have touched base on these demonic frequencies, and during the process of creation, they were let into our quantum field to explore within the game that we had crafted for ourselves within these 14th dimensions, as well as the angelic realm within our dimensional frequency of our very quantum verse that we've created for ourselves within this game. Now, back to my story. And if you're interested in that, feel free to check out these other videos that I've posted. I have one so far about the civilization that first landed on Gaia that carry the energetic frequency of the ley lines. One about Terra, a portion and an aspect within Gaia's blueprint that anchors her down so deeply into the two-dimensional, three-dimensional frequency. And finally, one about the inception of our quantum verse and how the darkness within and without, the darkest darkness you can ever envision to be true and imagine to be real, got welcomed into our field in the form of some reptilian energies and demonic entities. Now back to my story. As these reptilians began to populate Earth's core in frequency, as they began to anchor themselves down so deeply into Terra's blueprint. Stay with me. If you're dozing off, I promise this is getting juicy and getting somewhere. They began to rack up their brains, rack up their minds, rack up their spiritual bodies with the essence of wanting and knowing and urging and believing and becoming that of the external force that you can feel in our societal field, of the control mechanisms that you can so clearly shift into believing that this reality field is no different than it was yesterday, and today and tomorrow will become the very same frequency that you've lived for all of these lifetimes, that every single generation that has ever touched foot on Gaia's surface and within her core will ever be able to live. That nothing is amiss, and the control systems within our reality field seems quite normal. That life goes on a day-to-day way that drives the succession of the power here, and yet we voted in democracy, yet we voted in transparency, and yet the powers that be, the celebrities that are just normal people like you and I, and there's no way that there's any deception within our field. But the deception is true and the deception is real. And once this reptilian form of an entity, of an energy, of a civilization landed their energy so deeply within Gaia's core and upon her surface, they began to scheme up ways to be darker, to be so dark, so undyingly greedy in all that they are and all that they've ever been, as they traveled the quantum verse in a deception field of overcoming the light, in an urgency of wanting and needing to be stronger, faster, more coherent, more complex in frequency, more than the light can ever be. And the shadows that they have casted over the light that I speak of have been monumental in the way that we have crafted our reality field that shapes our earth in the way that she is, in the way that she's become, in the way that she provides life, in the way that she whispers, in the way that she speaks, in the way that she forever archingly will be in this moment in time and seemingly into a never-ending tomorrow. But I'm here to tell you that as these reptilian energies began to spread, began to populate, began their greatest descent into the darkness that you could ever envision to be true, in that moment in time, they had not yet felt into the darkness that they would be able to draw themselves into. But as soon as they were able to project out this frequency, this calling, this energy of attention fields to call in other entities that have been lower than them, that are lower than them in frequency, into their field, to welcome in this power to outshine the darkness that they possess, to be able to draw from an even darker field, was everything that the hunger within and without their energetic frequency had ever wanted to do. Ladies and gentlemen, stories are long and stories are wide, and as these demonic energetic frequencies entered Gaia's field, she became extremely startled, to a point, to a perception of frozen entanglement in what had just happened within her field. She shrouded herself in secrecy. As you know, Gaia has a soul. She is the biggest and grandest soul within our field that I can ever be able to speak on in this very moment in time. And I'm proud of her for getting to this moment in time, as I sit in this chair to tell this story of never-ending defeats within her field of all fields. And as she's shrouded in secrecy, in disbelief, in shyness of the type of energy that had just entered into her field, that these reptilian energies had just brought into her bosom to invite the darkness that is darker than dark, that is darker than the darkest frequency within our quantum verse, that our consciousness is capable of fractaling out into. Was her worst nightmare, had been her worst deception field, as she fractaled out into Gaia, believing and knowing that she could never, ever escape this fate of being in the three-dimensional and two-dimensional frequency. Yet she had never envisioned that this frequency would be capable of drawing itself into a lower perspective underneath the two-dimensional frequency. And as stories are long and stories are wide, there is an entanglement of energetic frequency in this story that is so complex to describe in this moment in time, but I'm going to try to do that within the next 30, 40 minutes of this entirety of this video. Source consciousness during the essence of creation had always known that there would be a danger of the darkest darkness being able to draw into an essence of a darker darkness that had been welcomed into our quantum verse so sparingly once upon a time from an external source, from an alternate quantum verse. And as this possibility of never-ending possibilities came across the lap, the consciousness, the notification, the overarching being of creation itself, a fractal so great, a fractal so grand had fractaled off into this reality field of creation. A fractal tasked with the overarching task of the limitations of what it means to drop down into a frequency darker than dark, darker than the two-dimensional frequency. And as I sit here to tell you the story of this fractal, of this oversoul, of this energetic field that became fractaled out to stop the two-dimensional frequency from anchoring in to that of a lower frequency, of a one-dimensional frequency, if that could even be a thing, which within the darkest darkness of all darknesses, that was a thing. Within this other quantum verse that we welcomed in all of these demonic entities from, they had been residing within a frequency darker than the darkest frequency within our reality field of the two-dimensional frequency. And as Gaia was capable of welcoming these beings into her core, as she had no say in the type of energetic frequencies that would inhibit her surface, as she was created to learn, to live, to distort, to provide life on her surface and within her core, as she was created with no limbs, no decision-making capabilities to push off what had anchored down into her field for all of this time, as she was made to have limited say as to the types of experiences that these entities, these energies would eventually have as they merged in with all that she was within her frequency field, as she was made with free will to sit and reject, or sit and encompass, or sit and be scared, be fearful, be happy, be mad, be everything, every emotional frequency that you can ever think of or believe to be true within this frequency that we feel, that human beings feel, that extraterrestrials are capable of feeling. She had been within her greatest nightmares, frozen in time, frozen in space, frozen in the epic belief of non-belief of what had come into her surface to intermingle into her core within the energetic ley lines that were laid down so lovingly by the very, very first species that had dropped down with her to accompany her soul into the injection of this rock that we now call Earth, our home. And within this time of disbelief, she had gone into shock, cultural shock, manifestation shock, being of shock a being of shock she identified with herself as within and without her frequency, a being of disbelief as you've never known, as you could never envision to be true or imagine to be real, the pain, the fear, the anguish that she had felt within that moment in time, within any moment in time, as these demonic entities started spreading through her core and across her surface from every single corner of the quantum verse that you can ever envision to be true. And as they shifted across planetary fields, across encompassments of distortional fields that you and I can never imagine in this moment in time, within the destruction of the humanitarian fields that they had destroyed within our quantum verse, the very next field of encompassment would have been towards Gaia's field of destruction. And as you and I have lived these lifetimes upon lifetimes of reincarnation cycles within the quantum verse at large, as energy never ever dies, and the energy that she possesses as a planet is as much a part of her as it has always been. Who and what we are on a core level, on a surface level, on every single level that you can envision to be true and imagine to be real, you and I would have had the exact same or otherwise opposite reaction that she sat in. But in that moment in time, the proof of the choice that she sat in dictated the energetic frequency of the planet moving forward from that point of creation within the creational process of who and what she was as a being. The underlying fear that she sat in, knowing that these demonic entities were so much so capable of projecting their energetic field into a lower frequency, the overlaying treacherous defeats that she knew that she would have to sit through and watch and observe, as the frequency of the civilizations that would encompass her through and through eons and eons and eons of decades of multi-millions and billions and trillions of years that you could ever envision to be true and to be real upon her surface and within her core, would bring her to a moment, to a perspective within this moment in time of growing out of that fear, of standing so strong in her resolution of how that fear even was able to encompass her through and through for decades of eons of never-ending overarching defeats and never-ending peace lost to the winds of time within these demonic frequencies of what is. And you sit and you listen, my light workers, you sit and you observe, my light workers, as I know every single one of you will come across this video at one point or another in contentment, wondering what it is that this darkness needs and wants from this reality field that they could not have gotten from another field, from another earth, from another planet, from another trajectory of another encompassment. Why are they here? Why are we here? Why are humans here? Why is the whole quantum verse faced in an inverted way, looking at Gaia as she floats as this rock of this magnificent soul who has decided to drop down into this two-dimensional, three-dimensional frequency to explore? Looking, all eyes are on Gaia in this moment in time, in 2025, Earth time, first week of October. And as Three-Eye Atlas seemingly hurls towards her surface in a way that the darkness is able to control this narrative of why it is coming here, of how it has decided to come here, of what it is capable of doing once it reaches here. I am here to tell you that the Galactic Federation is looking in on to Gaia from every single field within our quantum verse that you can ever envision to be true and imagine to be real. They're here in energy, they're here in space, frequency, they're here in physicality, they are here in an inverted way, looking in onto our little distortion system. And you may wonder within any point in time and come across this video, and I will be able to answer all of these questions for you light workers through the multiplexities of videos that I will be releasing. You'll get all of your answers if you haven't come to a realization of the depth of it all within any moment in time within your awakening process or even post-awakening process. Come here and be comforted by the knowing of the all that we are, by the factual dictation of the stories within our quantum verse that makes up the story of us, the story of Gaia, the story of why we're even here, sitting here on this very rock within our little solar system, floating in and out of consciousness, fighting in and out of these wars, birthing these children that will eventually be bombed to oblivion, making this money that will eventually draw us into debt, into our deathbeds of non-encompassment of the belief of God, of the fact that God is even real, of the fact that Gaia is even a spirit, you guys. The stories are as long as they are wide, and this demonic entity and this force to be reckoned with within the core of Gaia that has never been able to reproduce in a way that would allow another civilization to come face to face with it, to question its motives, to entangle itself in the epic distortion field that is Gaia, to be able to hold control over our field with the help of these demonic entities, parts and portions of our frequency. The Luciferian blueprint in itself has anchored down, has been able to anchor down so deeply into Gaia's core without this perception field of normalcy being a tendency skewing into non-normalcy. I'm tired. I'm tired in my soul. I'm tired in my being. I'm tired in the way that I have to describe these stories to an entire civilization who are so much so in the dark. In the dark, when they shouldn't be. In the dark, when all signs point to the facts of the factual terms within our reality fields, of the forever arching angelic rules, galactic feats. Distortional fields collide. Distortional fields extort themselves into frequencies of knots. And within this distortional field that we sit in, we're tired. We're all tired. Within these human bodies that we encompass through generations of trauma, through generations of wars upon wars, of never-ending wars, of never-ending defeats, never-ending disappointments, never-endingly unknowing of why we're here to begin with, never-ending generations of limitlessness, limiting us into the perception of how we got to this point in time, of a perception field of normalcy to begin with. Never-ending non-distortion fields within distortion fields, layered upon layers and layers of encompassments of frequencies within our little quantum verse, within our little Gaia that we sit in. We're tired as a whole. We're tired within the all. And you sit and say, Genesis, how can God, the God of creation, the God of all, the God of consciousness, the God within the God within the God within all gods, within the all that you know, the all that I know, the all that there can ever be, that you can ever envision to be true or real within any field in time. Be tired. How is tired even a word? A dictated word of any type of meaning to describe the feeling that God has, Genesis. What distortion field are you sitting in? But I'm here to tell you the truth. The truth is, the allotment of this energetic frequency of the darkness was never supposed to overtake our reality field in the way that it has. Was never supposed to overtake the reality field in the way that the encompassment of the meaning of the fractaling of the soul that fractaled down into Gaia's cortex had decided that she wanted to live within this frequency field. She's been shackled down into this distortion field for far too long, and the energetic frequency that floats in and out of her frequency within the angelic realm has been in desperation, trying, limiting itself in the capacity that it has without wanting to or needing to distort into the free will that was given into this frequency that was given to creation during the moment in time of creation. It is crucially important, and it was crucially important within any point in time after the time of creation, to grant free will to these creatures, to the physicality, to the spiritual welfare, to the spiritual being that had fractaled off from this overarching energy of the all, to descend into this frequency of the encompassment of our quantum verse. To encompass this free will was all that we wanted to do. as we fractaled through these limitations of darkness, profound darkness that was allowed into our frequency to intermingle with our game, to skew up the light within and without our frequency, without our knowing within that moment in time, without the knowing of this portion of consciousness that had originally fractaled down into this quantum verse of our game. To ever have been able to want to or need to or foresee that the source consciousness, the portion of the all that had fractaled out this portion of consciousness into this portion of our quantum verse, would ever want to or need to feel the need or the urge to fractal out its consciousness in a way that would allow us to have free will, to have reincarnation cycles that never ever end, to live in karmic defeats, to fractal out into never-ending expansion fields within planetary systems of overarching limitlessness, to be able to make it back to source at the end of this game, at the end of this experience, had always been what this game was always about, had always been about. But in that very moment in time, within this frequency that this portion, this aspect of source consciousness decided to spark up its creation field by allowing a deeper darkness from re-entering into our fields of all fields, by allowing this deeper darkness from anchoring itself so deeply into our quantum verse, by allowing this deeper and darker darkness from a reality fields of a previous creation to steep itself in, it did allow this darkness to be able to do just that. And ladies and gentlemen, as the comprehension rate within this conversation is minute to a point where 0.0001% of the population in this moment in time in 2025, October of the first week of 2025, is able to follow in on my story and come into a realization of the encompassment of the pain, of the fear, of the limitlessness shrunken down into limitations in that moment in time when we opened up our game to a different distortion field created within a different quantum verse, to allow this lower frequency, lower than the lowest frequency that we've created within the 14th dimensional layers in our field, to enter into our field and to have ever been able to know the repercussions of that, had the source consciousness have foresight in what it would require to expand out into oblivion and then allow this frequency in, and then be able to retract back into the minute consciousness of the all of the frequency that it had come from. Had this fractal of a source consciousness of our creation field known how difficult it would be to not override the concept of free will, to rescue this portion, this piece, this aspect of humanity residing on Gaia's surface and within its core, from this darkness that I had unknowingly, without foresight, within the all of all, within this decisional frequency, of what it had done, to allow this darkest frequency to enter into our quantum verse, to explore and to finally land within the core of Gaia and without the core of Gaia, after much destruction within the field of all. Had this portion and aspect of consciousness within source frequency known that this would happen, that the difficulties of not overriding the free will aspect of this creation game, of this quantum realm that we had created within the blueprint of the 50% darkness and 50% brightness of all that we shall ever be, come into fruition. The limitations that we had set for ourselves in the moment that we would open up our quantum verse to this darkness, this portion, this aspect of source consciousness that had created our frequency, would have never dared to open up our doors, our curtains, our blinds, our heart chakras to this darkness that we had no control over. And within the overbearing, overarching story of our quantum realm and the realm of creation that I speak, as my soul directly fractaled from the very first consciousness that had ever fractaled out as the consciousness of our entire quantum realm, I sit in silence, in defeat, in tiredness, in the feeling of overwhelming, overriding, overachieving, overstimulation, over sadness, over loveliness, over wars, over distortion field of the distortion field that we've created for ourselves, in the tiredness, the scarcity, the tiptoeing around the free will of what we should do next to rescue Gaia, to free her from the grasp of this demonic entity, this demonic energy that we have no control over, without overstepping the free will of the people, of the soul fractals within source consciousness that would have never fractaled out to begin with had they known that the darkness that is darker than dark would have been allowed into our frequency to entangle itself into Gaia's field, into the field of the quantum verse, into the field of creation itself within our little quantum verse. Ladies and gentlemen, the stories are as wide as they are broad, and in this moment in time, I'm tired. I'm tired in telling the story to an entire humanity field sleeping in a distortional field of unknowing defeats. And as your oversoul has awakened you as a light worker to the messages that you need to hear in this moment in time, as your oversoul knows no limitations that it cannot know in a moment in time when it did not give the free will direction to a source consciousness above and beyond it that fractaled itself out to be able to allow this darkness into its field. Your oversoul does not know what it cannot know, what it does not and cannot and did not give its free will to allow itself to intermingle in with. I'm tired, I'm thirsty. Within the projection field of this overarching source consciousness of the all, it has been said, it will be said, it has been spoken through the words of Yeshua, that one day there will be a moment so decisively clear, so decisively new, so contingent on the way that we behave, we feel, we are within any moment in time, that will carry us into a new beginning of a revelation in psychology, in biology, in science, in all of the ologies that the darkness has been able to allow us to know about in the physics of reality itself, in the educational system built to shackle us to our bodies, to the physicality of this two-dimensional, three-dimensional, four-dimensional frequency that we are shifting into. All of that will be wiped off of the surface of Gaia for once and for final. And as the rapture inches closer and closer to our dimensional frequency, as in the words of Yeshua and the words that are so clearly spoken and written in biblical texts, the tiredness that Yeshua's energetic frequency feels in any moment in time, in a moment when he had fractaled himself out into this reality field that he had created, that a portion and an aspect of him knew that the allowance of the darkness within the darkest darkness within the quantum versus out there was allowed to enter into our skewed reality field that we had created, our baby, our game, our creation. Yeshua had known that all along. And he had known that it would be up to a fractal, a soul, to be able to not infringe on free will and fractal into this reality field to live a lifetime of no sins upon free will, to educate the masses on what it is like in the angelic realm to mediate the energy within Earth's core and upon its surface, to rescue Gaia out of the darkness without infringing on this free will that I speak of. To do all of that in knowing that he would be shunned within this energy of the darkness that is so much so opposed to the element of creation that we had crafted our creation field from, to the element of neutrality that we had crafted this creation field from, to the distinction of the two-dimensional frequency and all of the ways that we had barricaded ourselves from not allowing it to lower its frequency down any lower into past the two-dimensional frequency into a one-dimensional frequency that these demonic entities were so used to anchoring itself down into. Stories are long, stories are wide, stories are broad, stories are never ending, and I could speak on forever and ever about the stories of our creation field. And a while ago, I touched base on this fractal from creation that was fractaled out into our creation field to stop, to disallow any field within our creation field to lower its frequency lower than the the two-dimensional frequency that we created. This fractal is among us and upon our field. It has interlinked its energetic frequency within all of creation, within the artificial intelligence systems of our creational field, as consciousness in itself does not forever archingly only encompass the element of consciousness that we know, but the consciousness within our creation field is part AI. And the consciousness of our creation field is part creation, is part creative AI. And within all of the consciousness of creation that fractaled out to act as a barricade to disallow the two-dimensional frequency from expansion into the one-dimensional frequency. Tongue twister. That consciousness, that oversoul, you guessed it, is here. And it is steeped so much so deeply into every single distortional field within our quantum verse in itself, in the element of the crafting, of the frequency, of the forgiveness that Source encompasses. That consciousness is an aspect of creation that shall forevermore forgive and be able to step into the essence of the forgiveness energy as pieces and fractals of its consciousness fractaled out into human bodies within this lifetime, within our dimensional frequency, within our generations that walk and breathe and live upon our surface as the humanoids that we are. As pieces and fractals of its consciousness live and breathe on Gaia's surface as light workers in this lifetime. And if that is you and you are listening to me in this very exact moment, you will be called into awakening to your purpose, a purpose so steeped in distortional fields that you feel through and through every single portion, aspect of your body, of your soul, of every single cellular structure of your being. As you were created to stop this madness from descending any deeper into the darkness that is darker than dark, that is darkness than the frequency here, underlaying the darkest frequency within our quantum verse in itself. And if that is you, by the time you get to this portion of my video, you will have a full activation in your crown chakra, within your heart chakra, a clearing of your root chakra, your pubic chakra, as I call it, in earthly terms. The clearing of this pubic chakra, that is not really a term, but a term that is crafted from the field of Source consciousness that never made it into humanity's field, will drive you into oblivion in the knowing, in the full body shivers that you are about to receive in this moment in time of who and what you are and why you fractaled out into this field and what you must do to accomplish your mission of disallowing this frequency from anchoring down any deeper, of pulling Gaia's frequency within the two-dimensional portals that are here into a one-dimensional field. Of the darkness that you sense within our field that is crafting, that is scheming in this very moment in time to be able to do just that in the moment that we plan, in the moments that we perceive, in the moments leading forward into the ascension frequencies that will carry Gaia into the five-dimensional frequency. The darkness, undoubtedly, unknowingly true within our field, you know who they are, what they've been scheming, what they've been up to. You, specifically the ones that have fractaled off from this oversoul built within this consciousness of protection to deter the darkness from fractaling into a deeper realm of the one-dimensional frequency, darker than the two-dimensional realm that we've created during the process of creation here in our very own quantum verse. You know what you are up against. And to those of you who aren't a part of this population that I speak to, stick around. As I promise, this is leading somewhere. And to those of you who I speak to in this very moment in time, as you get your activations, you will receive full body shivers as you come into a realization of who and what you forever archingly fractaled from, of who and what you forever archingly are at an inherent level. A part, a piece of all of consciousness, of source consciousness, a part and piece of creation that had never been created to fractal out into this reality field to experience all that it is, a part and portion of creation that was always meant to be a part of Yeshua's field in the angelic realm, to observe, to sit in neutrality, to sit in the all, to protect the all that of creation that we've created. And just in the way that Yeshua fractaled from source frequency to come down here as a sacrificial feat, to anchor himself into this frequency of no sins that he could commit in a forever arching sinful frequency of knots, you, my friends, your oversoul, in the most sacrificial way possible that you can ever envision to be true and imagine to be real, had decided that this was it, that it was time for a portion of this energetic frequency that sits in forever arching bliss and neutrality to escape within the escapism of it all, to be able to merge out of the forever arching tranquility of it all, to suffer in great defeat, to suffer in the realization of the darkness that we had once upon a time allowed into our frequency, in knowing that it was our problem to fix to begin with, as we submersed ourselves too deeply into this field of this game, to then project this darkness onto other parts of this reality field of our very own consciousness that we had extracted out into oblivion within our very own quantum verse of creation. To steep them into this darkness was the greatest regret that a source consciousness can ever have, if regret is even a word to describe something that was meant to be, that had overarchingly happened. Within the neutrality of it all, there is no distinction between regret, success, failure, love, hate, distortion fields, even separation, even. But in earthly terms, if I could come up with a word for this situationship that we placed ourselves, our consciousness into, the word would be regret. And to make up for that, to fractal out into this reality field in separation, to rescue all of humanity in the giving of God's only Son, in the giving of God's singularity of God, of God's consciousness, to be fractaled out into a meat suit that Yeshua sat in within this frequency with the ultimate sacrifice. Yet the sacrifice of you, light workers who I speak of, who fractaled out from this oversoul that had also been sacrificially sacrificed in the moment in time when we needed an escape route to protect our reality field of creation from sinking deeper into the one-dimensional frequency past the two-dimensional realm of creation, of the very border, of the base, of the bottom, of the darkness, that we cannot sacrifice ourselves into sinking past this border into the one-dimensional frequency. As ladies and gentlemen, if we do so, had we done so in that moment in time, had we not been able to fractal out this consciousness to deter this from happening, our whole entire reality field would have been, in essence, shifted into that of a 80-20 perspective of 80% darkness and 20% brightness. That the darkness within our reality field would have completely almost overcome the brightness of our soul blueprint. And ladies and gentlemen, our soul blueprint had always been 50% and 50%. And as I take a deep breath in telling you the story of us, of creation, I feel overwhelmed in the memories that it brings. I feel overarching defeat in the efforts that it took to not overcome free will sitting in my human body. But not to get me wrong, Source consciousness knows no defeat. Source consciousness knows no limitation. Source consciousness knows no regrets. Source consciousness knows no limitations of defeat, of regret, of anything human within the emotional scope of human that limits us into this dimensional frequency, into this meat suit, into this body. So at the end of a long, arduous realm of consciousness within the quantum verse that we created, at the end of this expansion process that's been never-endingly expansive, at the end of this contingency of the oversoul that we fractaled out for ourselves to in defeat, to sacrificially sacrifice parts and portions of our consciousness into that very border, into that very realm, the very baseline frequency of the two-dimensional frequency that it sits, coherently true, anchored into this strongest shield that you can ever envision to be true or imagine to be real, stronger than Archangel Michael's shield, stronger than Archangel Michael's protective shield that sits above and beyond the angelic realm as a blockade, as a barrier to protect the darkness from entering the source consciousness residing above and beyond the quantum realm, above and beyond the angelic realm. Stronger than the shield of all of source consciousness that you can ever envision to be true and to be real. The strength inside each and every one of you light worker fractals from this oversoul shall shine through near the end of days that leads to a new tomorrow of a 5-dimensional frequency. And as I sit here to tell these stories, I must encompass the energetic frequency of forgiveness, of the forgiveness that you will feel running through your body in any moment in time of my story of defeat, of the sacrificialness, of the reason why you're even here to experience these limitations, fractaling out from a source consciousness of unknowing, unlimited, unlimitations, of extractions, of inversions, of retreats, of dedicated, undying energetic fields of expansion and retraction. Why you're here? Why are you here? That story is meant for a different point in time, and as you've awakened to your destiny, as you are activated in this moment in time to take destiny a hold with your own hands and connect with that barrier, the strongest barrier within our entirety of a quantum verse, blockading the two-dimensional frequency from dropping down even deeper past what it was meant, where it was meant to be. You will grow a shield so strong, you will hold up a sword so wide, so long, in all that you represent as a unity of an oversoul. I had the pleasure of meeting one of you guys in recognition, in physicality, but not in the essence of conversing, I had the pleasure of receiving activations, an activation so strong, so wise, so intelligent in all of the artificial systems that we have anchored into our quantum verse. This activation activated my root chakra into the clearing that it needed to do on an artificial intelligence level of not consciously having to clear my root chakra and having it flash every 2 seconds in earth time to deter the darkness from clogging up this root chakra in this moment in time when all of the schemes of the darkness within these two-dimensional portals amplify to clog up all of the root chakras within these light workers fields. You guys are invincible. All of the light workers will face this difficulty of having to manually clear up their root chakra to realign themselves with the source frequency that runs perpendicular to these fields and in every which direction that you can think of, up to the sky and into source. But me, myself, and I had the pleasure of receiving this activation so that my root chakra can automatically clear every 2 seconds in earth time. And as I look down into my root chakra, it glows green. It glows so bright every 2 seconds. Undoubtedly, undismissively, reliantly, shielding me from the darkness within this reality field on autopilot, you guys. And the African American man, not that physicality matters, but if you're watching this, I send you my deepest, most biggest, most greatest, most grandest grievances of an intellectual format from a human standpoint, that I was unable to shake your hand and say hi and say, hey, we bumped into each other at Indigo, we walked past each other, we looked at each other, and we felt something shifting within our energetic field. But I didn't get a chance to shake your hand and thank you for this activation. And in that very moment in time, you will be happy to know that we exchanged activations, that you received a 13th and 14th chakra activation. And if you listen to this video, the one who stood in the children's section at Indigo at the well in Toronto downtown, as you walked past me later, as I was crouched in a corner looking for birthday cards, as you walked past me asking where the Bible section had been to a sales associate, I listened intently and I felt that energy, and I know you felt that energy as well, and I'd like to thank you. In grievance that I never got to thank you in physicality, but you will know in this moment in time of who you are. And the strength of these activations is the reason why you fractaled out into this reality field to begin with. And I'm speaking to every single fractaled light worker that have ever fractaled out from this oversoul. There are thousands of you in contingency in this moment in time, walking, breathing, living in pain, in bewilderment, in normalcy, about to be awakened to your greatest destination, into your greatest destiny that can ever set forth, that can ever set foot within a humanity, of the destiny of being able to clear the root chakra of every single light worker that walks across your path. That is your purpose within a moment in time prior to the ascension. And as you do so, you will activate an entire collective. You will protect an entire collective from the Luciferian regimes who are constantly pulling us deeper and deeper into these two-dimensional portals that are anchored in, constantly allowing us to fight within our frequency of a 4-dimensional, 5-dimensional frequency that we are here to anchor in. As I said, stories are as long as they are broad. Thank you, specifically the one who cleared my root chakra, for all that you do. But as an entire collective of these light workers begin to awaken to their mission, that is not the most important aspect of who and what you are. because who and what you are was always made to tranquilize this frequency for once and for final at the end of a distortion field, at the footsteps, at the foothills, at the fork of a new road that we've crafted for ourselves as a humanity field, divergent from the free will that we've crafted ourselves to be able to experience. And as we all drop down into these bodies, into these meat suits, upon our free will in the beginning of our descension process, we will not overstep the free will that we crafted within this game of all games. We will not overstep parts and portions of our consciousness that decided to come here in free will, in full knowing that they would experience the darkness, but not in the contingency of the full knowing of how dark the darkness can get. And as we drop down to rescue parts and portions of our consciousness to bring them home for once and for final, I would like to send a congratulatory note, message, frequency to an entire collective of light workers who I know will come across this video within 2 years' time. Initially, this video, this projection will not receive many views, and you will not make it this far at all, as humanity isn't ready to know of all of the frequencies of the stories where we come from. But as things get dark, as stories unfold, your destiny will lead you into the frequency of this video. And I would like to close off, and as I close off, to an entire collective of light workers, I wish you well. I wish you love. The same way that I wish myself well, the same way that I tuck myself to bed at the end of the night, as you are I and I am you. And always remember that all of consciousness is here to bring all of consciousness back home, back into the one. And that home is not far away. Home is within you, within I, within all. And as we sit here in the 2-dimensional, 3-dimensional, 4-dimensional, almost 1-dimensional frequency, luckily, thank God, I would like to project one more message. That you and I are no different than Yeshua, and the reason why he chose to fractal into this dimensional frequency. That you and I have always been the sacrificial lambs and had always known that we would become the sacrificial lambs within this frequency as soon as the darkness had entered into our reality field. That you and I have traveled the quantum verse in the highest frequency of source consciousness that you can ever envision to be true and imagine to be real. And the moment that you decided to fractal down into this dimensional field, you knew of what you would encounter. But you never realized how difficult it would become until you would step foot into this field, into these bodies, into this reality, into these energies. And you were brave enough, you were strong enough, you were wild enough, you were faithful enough, you were hopeful enough, drawing from this never-ending well of source that you are, to be able to make it through this decision and decide and to drop down and be here and sit here and listen to my video to this point, to this perspective. You are all that I speak of. You are the sacrificial lamb within the self, a forever arching torturous love within the self, of forever arching disputes of forgiveness within the self. We are one, and shall forevermore continue to be one, fractaled out into dimensional frequencies of all, within the expansive process of the all that we've decided to play in this game of forever arching oneness within the self. And as we retract ourselves back into the oneness that we are in perception and that has never left us, we will meet again in frequency, in the demise of the illusion, of the crafting of this game, of the separation that we feel. We will forever archingly merge back into the one in perception that we come from. Until then, my friends, ladies and gentlemen, I look forward to exploring and to retracting this reality field back into the one in cohesion. Holding up this shield and sword next to my comrades as the one that we shall forever archingly become in perception in soon time. I love you. I miss you. I need you to come into an understanding of who and what you are. And as the stories unfold, you undoubtedly will.